being tested. That's fantastic right there. That'll work great. I'll get the second one ready for questions. I was chit-chatting away this morning, and all of a sudden it's 8 o'clock. So thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for coming to Forum this morning. I'm Barbara Bynum, and it's my pleasure to be one of the hosts for Forum, along with Kathy Hebers, Judy Ann Files, and Phoebe Benzinger. She's in the back. And as always, we thank you very much for coming. We thank you for sharing the Forum email that you get with friends who often then will sign up for their own email that they get every Saturday morning. If you are here today and you're not on our email list, come see us afterwards. We'll just tell you how to get on the email list. I am super excited to introduce our topic this morning because Colorado Flights Alliance hasn't been here for a couple of years, we figured out. But Colorado Flights Alliance, it sounds like it does something across the entire state of Colorado, but it is focused, it is not across the entire state, it's focused on the Montrose and Telluride airports and working with the airline partners to bring air service into Montrose and Telluride airports. And so Matt Skinner is here. He is the executive director for Colorado Flights Alliance. The board that he works with is made up of partners from the Telluride area and the Montrose area. I represent the City of Montrose on that board, and I'm joined by Lloyd Arnold, who runs the county's airport. And the two of us are the Montrose reps on that board, and we meet every month, and Matt gives us lots of great information, so I asked him to come and tell you guys about how the program works and how and why we get such great airline service into our little regional airport. So Matt will tell you more about himself and his background. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thanks, Barbara. She did catch me a little off guard in introducing myself and trying to figure out, what's quick and what's relevant. Been lucky enough, I'm from the Northwest originally, moved to Colorado in the 90s after college with my brother. But I, following, spent a lot of time working in tourism in different destinations. I had the fortunate experience to work in 6 different countries. Worked in both summer, coastal, mountain, and different types of destinations throughout, which is just a great education. And coming back to Colorado, and then worked in mountain resorts from the early 2000s on. Really have had, again, a fortunate time where I was involved with the Colorado Tourism Office and the chair of that board for some time, and worked in Colorado Ski Country, but really also found my way through a lot of the destination marketing organizations, and ultimately ended up in Telluride and running sales and marketing for the resort there for a number of years, which I had also done in Durango previous to that. During that entire time, though, and of course, when you're in the sales and marketing world, you're in the air world too. And so really in Durango, I got my introduction into the air piece of it, and then came over here, and then about 10 or 11 years ago, wow, I had the opportunity to take the helm of this organization. And this was something that was really exciting for me, is just that it was bigger than tourism. It was a regional economic effort, a regional collaborative effort. It's something that really you can start to make a difference for an entire area and create something and grow it and watch all facets of an economy take off, and using the strengths that you have, using tourism and riding that horse is my cliche that you use to then branch out and build other parts and build more year-round and balanced economies. And really, we hope that as we built the air service over the last 10 years, that this is what's going down, and that we've had some great steps. You always have your forwards and your backs, but it's just been a great pleasure to be able to work with all the different groups and the governments, the county, the city. Actually the multiple governments in the Telluride Valley, and then all the individual and private stakeholders. And so, really enjoy doing this, and just something that we can help hopefully continue to push forward. I'll give you a quick nutshell today. We'll do a little national, we'll do a little industry specific, and kind of where we're going next, and just, regional specific and where we're going next. So coming out of COVID, it has been a very mixed bag of things, very positive for the western slope of Colorado overall on an economic level. Nationally, you still have these kind of mixed messages where people are very nervous about recession, although that's getting better now, but they still are prioritizing spending on travel. You had business travel go to 0, but then all of a sudden it starts coming back up now, and I've heard from some airlines that it's at 70 to 80%. We've had fares and airline fares drop down to almost nothing to all the way back to very high again. And again, there's a lot of demand out there that we call kind of artificial or accelerated demand for travel coming out of COVID. And so what we saw then was that leisure demand really powered up. Demand for rural communities as businesses relocated, as people relocated and were able to work and telecommute, et cetera. And so we saw the big influx out here all the way up and down to 550. And so we're still continuing to see these mixed messages. There's still definitely some barriers to travel, both on the business side and the leisure side as far as cost right now. Everything is more expensive. And the airlines, as you know, we ran into a giant pilot shortage coming out of COVID. The costs for fuel and all of their pieces of the puzzle went up. And so all the costs for the customer on the other end have gone up as well. And so, we're seeing a little bit of balancing to that now, where hopefully it's coming to the middle where there's a little more overall confidence and less worry about economic recession. And then the costs for the airlines are hopefully coming back down to find a little more middle where they kind of spiked over the last year. In a quick nutshell, air traffic just this year recovered to where it was in 2019. I see you squinting. What, you can't read these squiggly lines? So this is actually meant to just be a spaghetti visual. And more or less what you can see is that 2019 is the blue one and 2023 is the blue one, and they're pretty close together. I think a lot of people had thought air traffic had recovered a year or two ago with all the explosion in leisure travel, but only just this year got back to the level that it was at prior to the pandemic. With that, we've seen a very mixed bag from the airlines. They've all had a lot of different recovery arcs as well. And so, again, vertical spaghetti, but you can see each of the airlines here. This is 19, and then the purple one is this year. And so basically only again in the last, few months we'd even call it, have they come back to where they were. And it's been kind of a steep drop and then a steep recovery. Sorry, I'm not used to two-handed. And the thing is again, it's been a mixed bag for the airlines. You had American Airlines lose $500 million in Q3 this year, which is summer, right? And that's supposed to be the most lucrative time of year. The other two airlines cleared $1 billion, so to speak, and not cleared. These are the EBITDA reports, and they have a lot hung up in those numbers. But it just shows the health of the airlines is very variable, and it's actually affected what's happened here at the Montrose Airport with our airlines either growing or shrinking, et cetera, as we move forward. On the overall, and if you look at just the nation, again, some of the major hubs, like Chicago's still down 25% from where it was prior to the pandemic. But Denver was up. Denver was the biggest airport in the world for a short period, just so you guys know. Coming out of COVID, we were the quickest to recover. The combined demand for leisure and relocation was crazy, and all of a sudden we were like ahead of China for a hot minute there. And so, we're back down to, where we probably should rest in the top 10. But obviously with all the gates and everything going on there, it's great for the state. But with that, again, it's only this year where we've seen that national network recover to the level where it did in 2019, and it's a little bit of a different mix, again, as we're coming through. So what happened with our network over this time? So we were very fortunate. It's been 2 years, so I can kind of dig, but I try not to go too deep. Coming out of the pandemic, we actually fared much better than our friends on the Western Slope and a lot of other mountain resorts. And one of my favorite fun facts is that Grand Junction actually lost all of its United flights for a moment, and they were flying Junction through here. So that showed us how strong we were prior to the pandemic. Really, that we had built something that had a ton of momentum and solidity, which had been the goal for those years before. Then since, we've had the same kind of thing where we've had some routes come in and out, and this winter was actually tough. So specifically the American piece of it, we had built up the starts of a network. We had LaGuardia, we had Phoenix, was of course the big one to talk about. We had Chicago for a hot minute. And so, unfortunately, what we've been able to do is balance capacity by continuing to add to Dallas, but we lost those other couple of flights, the LaGuardia Saturdays. And the Phoenix was kind of the big one, which was sort of an interesting piece of this, is that it had already not been performing very well, and we don't really know why. It's one of those things that we pushed over the years. And then ultimately, we ended up putting one of the airline partners into the Tex Airport, and we thought that they would just move the service up there. Telluride Airport. And so, with that, we thought that they would remove the Phoenix flight down here right away, but they didn't. They kept it for a year or two. And so at that point, we're like, well, we want to keep them both. And so at that point, it became a little bit of a shell game. When they ran into their issues, though, with both capacity, pilots, and financials, the Phoenix flight, and not just to here, to Eagle, they actually cut. There was a sort of a broad swath of cuts this year. Jackson lost LaGuardia and Miami. We lost Phoenix and LaGuardia. And so with that airline, they've been a little bit more in contraction. So they're here. They actually flew in here yesterday, which was great through the new jet, which we'll get to, which is awesome. And had some beers yesterday and talked to them about it. And like they're looking forward to growth again. But where they are right now is much more constricted than their other partners. And so on the counterbalance of that, what we saw was United throw 25% more capacity at Newark. And actually, I should give American some credit again. We keep running larger and larger aircraft out of Dallas. We have 2 a day now on full mainline jets. We've got a mainline jet all the way through the off season, so pretty healthy there. Our United routes are healthy. We've got the United Houston dailies, etc. And then again, the big bump in Newark, which is great this winter. Delta's gone full daily, where they had only been spotty through January, and added an extra week to it. And so, we've got, depending on the airline health, is kind of how our story has gone too. On the and Southwest actually, just to keep that. Really excited this winter as we went to Dallas daily, but we took down one Denver. We had 3 Denvers before on a 143-seat aircraft, which was kind of a lot for us. And so we at that point had actually pushed them to take one of those flights and switch it to Dallas daily, knowing that we have the demand out there and actually on both sides of the ball. And so they did that for us this winter, and it's going well, and we're excited to have that. And, as we talk to them also about potentially jumping into the Phoenix market. Is there a powerhouse down there and possibly replacing American along with a couple other options? Delta, it turns out, is very powerful in LaGuardia as well, so if United American can't fly it, Delta's another candidate. And so those are the conversations we've been having around this winter's schedule. At the end of the day, our capacity is probably within 3 to 4% of where it was, even with all those changes, and so we're able to adjust. We're going to do questions at the end, right?
Yeah, but would you stop because you're here, Matt, and tell us what all your alphabet soup means? I don't.
That was just the alphabet soup I went through by name. But if you want me to.
No,
Denver, Chicago, Newark, Houston, San Fran, LAX, Dallas, Denver, and then Dallas Love Field. That's Austin. We have like 4 or 5 flights in spring from Austin, which is great, but we definitely want to build on it. Atlanta, and then Denver and Phoenix for Denver Air. And that's into text. What we have seen as well in looking at those national barometers is kind of a normalization of booking curve this winter. And so you can see we're the big fat green one right now. The historic ones are kind of the gray, a little bit of the blue last year, and this was coming out of COVID. So coming out of COVID, we saw that accelerated spike in demand for travel, right? It was odd times. They were booking President's Day way early. And then ultimately, it's starting to level back out. So,
Nice job, thank you.
The 2 Thanks.
Fastest presentation ever.
Okay. So give you guys some of your data.
I told him he talks really fast, but that's amazing.
And so what we've seen this winter then through the season, and this is kind of the months of a winter, is these are the old spikes of presidents that were booking very early post-COVID, and then we're kind of back now towards that gray line, which is sort of a more normal winter pace. And so there's all kinds of different thoughts on the volume that's come to the western slope, some good, some bad. And I think that we have had a lot of protests that we're kind of normalizing again around demand just for infrastructure and traffic, et cetera. But at the same time, we're still well ahead of where we were in the 18s, 19s, et cetera. And as that goes, we're trying to figure out what the good balance is. Obviously we want multiple pieces of the economy supported through this. How do we manage tourism infrastructure while we're continuing to push business infrastructure? And that's where we try to keep the perspective is, yeah, we may be down a little, like we're down probably 4 or 5% year over year, but we're up, 20% from 19. And so, trying to keep perspective on the fact that we've had really solid growth and are in a very healthy economic position, and some normalization now, especially right now as people are going to Europe, businesses are branching out into different regions of the country again, that we're still on a pretty solid and consistent path. Just a quick note on summer, everything is kind of been consistent with daily Houston, Chicago, Denver, of course. The one addition will be Southwest Dallas this summer. We fly daily Denver out of Southwest too. Denver Air has Denver and Phoenix, and then we're pushing for a couple of other spots. Love to see Atlanta go to year-round. We'd love to punch Phoenix in with Southwest if we could. And there's a couple other projects actually that we're working on there. Again, American's back with a healthy 2 flights a day on the mainline jet. and really one of those things where we're starting to look to the East Coast. In the winter you can see that spaghetti map actually stretches a little further. In the winter, in the summertime, we rely heavier on those hubs with more volume, but ultimately we'd like to find a nonstop East Coast route. Maybe it's New York, maybe it's Atlanta, etc. Looking ahead, and that's kind of what I was teasing to, we've got a brand new airport. So we've got a couple desks out there that are going wanting. And really where we have talked about that growth is along the lines of what I was just talking to in the summer. Who can help service from the East Coast, but also the Northwest now. And really we've had this sort of love-hate struggle going with LA for a long time, in that they always show up in big numbers, but our nonstop flights don't do that well. And so we've been talking heavily with Alaska, we've been talking with Breeze, which is an airline that came on during the pandemic, and along with adding again with American, but also a couple other routes with our current carriers, as well as some of the smaller ones, like some of the regional carriers that pop back up. There's public charter of JSX of the world, which some of you know of, and it's a great product, but we haven't found the right fit for us yet for the region. But looking at everything from top to bottom as we normally do, and then trying to figure out where the targets are. But hopefully by next year, as the jet bridges and the new check-in desks go, we'd love to see a new sign up there if we can, and we're working with a couple partners now to see what's possible. In taking a look, just and not to break our own arm, patting ourselves on the back. As far as the growth has gone over the last multiple years, we do a comparison, of course, to our regional partners, and I'll come back to the other one, and then to our mountain comp set as well. So over the last 10 years, and I don't know if Lloyd's been over here in a while, but he likes to throw this one out. We actually have caught and passed both the other regional airports, Junction and Durango, as far as employments and capacity go. And so, coming out of the pandemic, Southwest was a great big addition to that, which was fantastic, but we were already on the path and kind of on the march to catch them. And really, once that leisure demand kicked up, we had Southwest come in, built off the strength of what we had done before. They chose us and Hayden, that we were able to push forward, and then that's helped pull up actually some of our other United, and again with the American Dallas routes, and see that pull ahead. So we're a little bit proud of that one, and definitely one of those things that we want to keep going. I was informed that they are peppering your social media feeds from the Grand Junction Airport with ads for the new Breeze flights, so we're going to note that. Maybe we've always been a little bit polite about our marketing on the 550. Maybe we're going to be less polite. So we'll see how that goes. If we go back just a quick second and compare ourselves to the other mountain destinations.
Tell us what those mean.
Yeah. Here's the last 10 years. It's kind of like each airport. There's Aspen, that's us. Eagle is Vail, Gunnison is Crested Butte, and Hayden is Steamboat. You can actually see the Steamboat is kind of just hanging a little bit. We had very much outpaced them in growth in the years prior. Post-pandemic, and with Southwest we saw a hop, and with our other airlines taking off. But just on a quick visual, we've outpaced our competitors pretty handily. We've probably got 3x the air service we had 10 years ago. The next closest one is at, I think Hayden had the kick, but that was more or less a Southwest carry at 50 to 60%. So we've done very well, and again, it's a regional draw. As we go at this, we ride the tourism piece of it, but ultimately it is about the whole economic piece. And so with that, added population, added businesses to Montrose, added business usage of those aircraft, all of those things, and they're all one meant to support the other, that helps round out the demand for those flights, and then helps bring more, and then that of course attracts more business, etc. We do like to track against the taxes in towns. We use the sales taxes from the cities and the counties. I did throw what I knew from 2023 on there, and do a little last couple months forecast, and as you can see those trends, and there are a lot of factors in this. I am not stating that air is the singular driver for sales tax growth, but it is certainly something that we believe contributes, and as you can see the trends are pretty close to mirroring each other as far as air growth and sales tax growth in the region. The green one is Montrose County sales taxes, and the orange is the city. With that, we did do an economic study, 3 years ago now, and it was pre-pandemic, so the numbers are going to change pretty dramatically. I just threw this up here because basically I wanted to show that we're going to refresh this. And back when we did take a hard look at it and look at the interrelated economies, how many employees are traveling up and down the highway, how much spending from the mountain communities is occurring, especially at South Townsend. But you know, and what support then you know, is coming out of the Montrose employee base and demand base, and how much tourism money is actually getting spent in the town. We were unable at that point to really dig into what the business development side of it was, and having seen and heard, and we've talked to, you know, multiple businesses who've located here, the developments that are going on here, we speak to them fairly regularly. We want to figure out if there's some way to gauge how much business development benefit is involved and reliant on air service as well. It's kind of a tough one, but you know, we'd love to get it in there. This study was basically just tourism. We were able to measure it, so we knew it, we went after it. And with that, you know, even though there's a lot of thought, like tourists come down here, they go to Uray, they go to Telluride, etc., but a full third of that spend and that economic benefit stays in the city, county of Montrose. And so with that, we're trying to figure out how to layer on the other additives and benefits of air service, but ultimately it's just to give some grounding on what that really does for the local economy. Lastly, I just want to say thanks to the airport. So it was a big project. It was $50 million. It was a lot of years of conversation. I don't know if you've all been out there, but I encourage you to go. It's really phenomenal. As I mentioned yesterday, our American Airlines guys got to experience the jet bridge on their flight for the first time, and that was an eye-opening and very positive moment for us. Maybe I just told David that. But really great job by the county and Lloyd and the team out there. And, you know, the check-in area with the small aircraft, I have kids, they're 10 and 12, they just think that's the coolest thing. Escalators, all that jazz, but really, for us, there's just a lot more room now, and a lot more options for airlines, and it really opens up where we had kind of been at a lid point right before the pandemic, right before this development, where adding any other carriers was going to be tough. And Lloyd's always done a phenomenal job pivoting, by the way, and finding ways for us to add different things and to manage, and like we've managed the schedules together, but this really does open up the possibilities for the future. And again, we're not just going to go out there and chase growth for growth's sake. You know, we're very strategic about how and what routes we want to add. We do all data-based, you know, basically who's flying where, what the demands are both for our incoming and local businesses outgoing. We survey out there. Please fill out the surveys when you're out there, because it does help inform us as to where and how you want to fly. And with that, we're just very excited for the future and to keep the ball rolling forward.
Thank you, Matt.
You bet.
Also, when you're at the airport, you see maybe a desk that says, it might say Visit Telluride, and there's some nice people there. Those are your
Hi
people,
there.
not the airport's people, right? I mean,
No, that's correct. We actually fund and operate the guest services program at the airport, along with flight development and a couple other things. We try to do our best to help facilitate all the relationships out there.
guest services, that was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what other kinds of questions? Delphina, coming over.
I have a couple questions. I like the idea of the desk, and do we have a Visit Montrose / Black Canyon desk as well?
It's actually all one desk, and you'll see that the Visit Montrose logo and the Telluride logo and maybe the county logo are all on the front of that desk, and then we have everybody's materials. And then we need to do it this year, actually, but we usually have cross-training between the visitor center and it's actually a mixed team of the tourism office and, well, mostly the tourism office from Telluride now and their staff. And so we make sure that they have all of the information and generally should have all the materials on that desk, but it's a collaborative effort.
And then you mentioned that you talk often to the new development and how things are going there and businesses that are coming into town. But do you talk to your real estate community to know who's moving into town, have surveys on, you know, who's bringing, because I believe the airport makes a big difference on who's moving to Montrose.
I actually talk to the realtors quite a bit, and I like to hold them up as a shiny example of folks who voluntarily contribute to this program. And so, you know, the way we're funded is basically lodging tax and restaurant tax, primarily out of the city or out of the towns of Mountain Village and Telluride. The City of Montrose participates, the county takes care of infrastructure, and then there's independent businesses, the retailers in the Telluride area contribute, but the realtors are actually right in that ballpark of voluntary contributors, and I generally go around and actually speak with them.
In Telluride Realtors.
In Telluride
Delphine's a Montrose Realtor, but you take her money too, right?
We would take your money too, that's where I was headed. But I usually run around and talk to the realtors, the different houses at least once a year in Telluride, and I would be more than happy to come down and speak to your group or groups, and especially if there's a collective realtors association that I can hit everybody at once, that would be fantastic.
I'm coming back to you. Hi, Chris.
Just a quick question. So why does Southwest list Montrose as Telluride Crested Butte as the destination?
Because in their minds, it's a double win, right? And so even though, and we track the percentage of passengers who come in and out of the airport through those surveys, and it's a pretty small percentage, but for them, it's just frosting on the cake. We don't actually mind as long as it's not displacing our people and it's putting added bodies on those planes right now. This is a grand experiment by Southwest, I would put it that way, and maybe that's not something I want on YouTube, but we're two of their very first regional markets. Like, they did not fly anywhere less than 500,000 people in population before us, Hayden, and then a couple others around the country. And so we are definitely still, I think, trying to prove out, that we have the demand. And so with that, we're okay with those folks coming down and using the airport. And honestly, it puts us in a conversation about larger regional collaboration again at some point, which I would love. Ultimately, we'll see how that demand pans out and it changes over time, and keep an eye on it.
I'm coming up front, Chica.
Okay, what I remember when we started this back in the 90s, I remember we had contracted with a consulting firm, and they basically said, it's really an interesting story, but there's no way this is going to work. What was done to make it be so successful as what's shown here? Because basically they said, if you're within 100 miles of a regional airport, and a regional airport is Grand Junction, that there's no way that you're going to be able to survive in the long run with an airline.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. That's a good one. So the airport regionalization is a huge topic, and we heard it 30 years ago, we heard it 10 years ago, and actually it kind of happened in a lot of places post-COVID. And so it was a huge focus of ours. Airport health was like one of the key, when I first took this job in 12 or 13, we were very much focused on just that specifically and making sure that we didn't lose so much traction to our competitive or sister airports up and down the road that all of a sudden we became almost obsolete. And so what we did then was, to go back to my favorite cliche, we used the horse that we had, right, which was tourism very specifically and a very high level of demand in this region, and very strategically built the flights. We didn't come in and try to add a year-round flight to Vegas, right? We put in Chicago, Houston, Dallas, right, as examples very specifically and during the seasons. If you guys remember Dallas, it was a 50-seat jet running from June to August in the summer. We're running 2 737s like through that entire, May through October, November period now. And so more or less built out from those core demand periods. And every year we'd add a week. And actually that's one of the things I should throw up for Chicago and Houston for Newark is using that same strategy now to come back of like, Chicago's the next goal for year round, right? And so each year we're gonna add another week or two. As we develop demand in the region, weddings got big. So that really helped us in the fall as an example. We've got more business travel out of Montrose now, without a doubt, which are really packing April and May flights, which was just something interesting that we didn't really predict earlier. And so with that, trying to build out from our core routes and the demand that we have, and not biting off too much at once, but at the same time pushing where we can. And so with that, then we were able to both expand demand. And I think that collectively as a region, we've also done a good job without blowing the lid off it of establishing Telluride as a national destination, which in the early 2000s it was arguable about name recognition on that, right? And I was running the marketing at the Ski Resort at the time, so I can own it. And so, with that, and then you're right. And then honestly, look at the large developments now along the river here in Montrose, and the business and the medical facilities, and all of those things then help raise that tide. And so, not a specific answer, but hopefully generally that's how we had just used our strengths to try to build off and expand from.
Matt, maybe you can say what is just obvious to you but may not be obvious to folks, because you talked about who's paying into Flight Alliance, but you haven't really explained how you spend the money and just the concept of a flight guarantee. Like, what does that mean? We don't just ask them to come, we incentivize them to come.
First we hit them with a lot of data just on this exact point of why we have demand and this will work for them, because ultimately an airline doesn't want a flight that's subsidized. They want something that's going to stand on its own and be sustainable. But getting it started takes time and money. And so more or less what we do is if they have not that many and very mobile assets, right, that they can put anywhere they want. And so basically you want to have them choose us to put that asset here. And so with that, they need a baseline amount of coverage on the operating cost of that aircraft. So let's say, if an airline's going to cost X to fly in here for an entire year, they would like to make sure that they have half of X guaranteed as far as the coverage of that operating cost. And that's basically where we come in. I can go down the rabbit hole, but basically it's just making sure that they have a backstop to that when they come in here. And then what we do hopefully is prove that we've got more demand than X, right? And so maybe the first year, even though we guaranteed half of X, we only paid them for about a quarter of X, right? And so that's a good sign. And then the next year we paid them for an eighth of X. And then 3 years down the road, X goes away and they're running a sustainable flight, right? The tough ones, like we did try Vegas actually with Allegiant. There was X, and we paid like 80% of X. And then 70, and then kind of 60, and it just never really got that healthy. We've had our bad ones too. And so collectively with Allegiant, we're like, this isn't working. Let's see if we can fly somewhere else. And so it's funny because I got hit yesterday with a Vegas request for a flight from a fairly significant person. It was like, okay, we tried that, but that's generally how the guarantee works and how we incentivize it. And the thing about it is, we have, I wouldn't call it we have a fairly consistent funding stream, right? And so what you can do then is when you build one flight off the guarantee, that's when you can take that powder or that resource and go talk to the next airline or the next flight and roll it over and roll it forward. And we've actually had quite a bit of success getting the Houstons, the Chicagos, and the Dallases off of the guarantee over time.
That's a great explanation. Oh, and see, now there's all these questions.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. How much does Gunnison Crested Butte feed into all of this?
We see their numbers around 5% usage of our airport, actually, but that number's come up with Southwest, so maybe it's 7 to 8%, which is great. Come use our airport. If you want to at that rate. Again, there's no displacement for us, and it helps build our flights.
And my second question is, on social media, they have one picture of CMU's, I forget which athletic team, boarding in Montrose. Do you go after those kinds of groups, or was that just a fluke that CMU Grand Junction, say, girls basketball team was flying out of Montrose?
So wait, that was on CMU's site, or that was on?
That was on social media. Probably Montrose was promoting that
The
picture.
airport.
I wasn't sure if it was blended into the Gunnison conversation. Got it. So yes, we definitely go after group collectively as tourism destinations up in the valleys. Like there's an entire department dedicated to that, and they bring in, and actually it's early December, you'll see like a huge group of grad students come from Chicago every other year. And there's a bunch of students who come the week after New Year's, which is great because it's very quiet for the rest of the world of travel. When it comes to those sports teams, it's generally charter. And so on certain points, like Denver Air, our partners who fly Telluride, they fly sports teams all over the country. So they and we and our partners love to see that as well. And with that, I don't know if we're chasing colleges exactly, but we certainly chase leisure group, all the other stuff out there. There is a dedicated effort to that. And it definitely helps in those softer weeks of the year.
Thank you. I do vote for a public charter like JSX or something like that. That'd be great. Also, I was wondering, what would it take to be able to go west instead of having to go east to Denver to go west? I hate going to Denver. To maybe go to Salt Lake or something, and then you can fly to any other coastal town or Alaska or wherever, but I'm tired of going to Denver and getting caught in weather and runway problems and things like that. So what would it take, or have you looked at that?
Yeah, we definitely have, and it takes demand. And so that's, at the bottom line of it. And it's, Salt Lake is one of those things where, we had tried it a bunch of years ago. Junction, ourselves, and Durango all had Salt Lake flights. And then they all went away. Ultimately, Durango and ourselves went away earlier, and Junction, as we know, is a big hit to them. Lost a pretty significant portion of their capacity with 3 flights a day to that Salt Lake flight. And honestly, somewhat curious as to how that's not returned, but the door is open. So we have certainly been talking to SkyWest and Delta about that. They have Salt Lake in and of itself, and the travel pattern, as you're talking about, has been something of the challenge, right? We don't have a ton of demand. We have some Seattle traffic, and I'm still trying to figure out which business it is because it's very consistent and we see it, but we're not quite sure and haven't unraveled what it is yet. But there's also, I'm from that region, and so I think there's also some connectivity there, just people-wise. But the demand we saw through Salt Lake the first time wasn't massive. We actually saw a really high number of people connecting, like New York to Salt Lake, and then hopping down here, and then East Coast, et cetera. And so that actually is a bonus to have, because if then we could unlock the West Coast too, we'd have both. Since then, Delta has reorganized all their flights in that airport. There's a huge construction project that's actually just finishing up there. And so we were actually set to fly Salt Lake again right before the pandemic, but talking to SkyWest directly, and then that went away for several of us again. And so we are back at the table and talking about that. And then the other piece of that, San Francisco was actually growing gangbusters, and that was our real key. We were actually going to go summer daily, right, again before the pandemic, and it was then winter daily and summer daily. And unfortunately, the San Francisco metro is one of the hardest hit post-pandemic and really has not recovered. And as an airline hub, it's also the slowest recovering one in the country, or maybe the bottom 2. So that's a bummer for us because that's the one we were really looking at as far as this West Coast piece. We've talked to Alaska about Seattle quite a bit, and we've also now talked to Alaska, Breeze, United, Delta about LA. And again, LA is one of those things where you can collate all this data 50 different ways, right? But we see all kinds of LA traffic. LA is always in the top 5 to 8, but they're flying through Denver. They're coming on our Denver air flight through Phoenix. They're working hard to get here. And then we stick the nonstop flight in there, and we only fill it halfway. And we cannot figure out why that is going that way. My theory is we just need more of it. That's how LA travels, and 3 or 4 days a week in that market, or 2 or 3 days is not enough. You need 5 or 7 because they don't travel like the East Coast. It's not 6 or 7 days, it's 2 or 3 or 4, and it's not always on a weekend. And so that's one of the things that we're starting to unravel. So yeah, we looked very hard at the West Coast, and we are trying to figure out what our next best move is. And the 2 carriers who are at the top of our list are actually West Coast focused. By the way, Alaska just bought Hawaiian Airlines, or merging with. And so we were a little worried they were just going to go beach, but they are going to go full leisure, which is actually good in our conversation as this goes. So small little tidbit. Sorry, that was a really long answer to a short question. Yeah.
So you mentioned trying to expand on the East Coast, and I'm wondering if Orlando would be in that. There's so much to do in that area. Space Coast, cruise ships, of course, all of the theme parks. And it seems like, and you made it sound like maybe a little taboo to advertise in Grand Junction, Durango, or whatever, but I think a flight down there would flourish if we could capitalize on the whole western slope to feed into that flight. We're centrally located for Durango, Cortez, Grand Junction, Gunnison, to pick up that flight and be able to utilize all that is there, especially this time of year when we want to get the heck out of here in the cold and go do something fun. So just wondered if that was on the radar.
Yeah, 2 good things in there. The first one is absolutely, that's exactly how we go after the air service and trying to, it's called the catchment area for the airport, and continuing to broaden it. When we had Allegiant, we were actually pulling people all the way from Glenwood. We're definitely doing that now with Southwest, and I think even starting to pull up from Durango a little bit, even though Red Mountain's no treat in the winter. And so, with that, that's exactly what we're trying to do with the airport regionalization question. We want to be the strongest player, and so that's how we are looking at the flights. And yes, as Barbara can attest, we have looked and talked about Florida in multiple guises, but we have not necessarily found the right fit. But it has certainly come back onto the radar with some of the kind of mid to low cost carrier players now, like the Breezes of the world, and again with American, who's very strong down there, and trying to figure out. We had Charlotte for a hot minute as well with American, and it did very well, but they use that hub more for East Coast focus than ski now. And so that was great for Florida. It made it very easy, but we definitely have this dream of Florida in some capacity. We looked at really the Miami-Fort Lauderdale area for quite a while, but I would say that Orlando and Tampa are actually probably in front of them at the moment, just for all the reasons you just listed as possible demand.
Hi. How are you? Thank you for sharing all of the data. I have a data question. So when you talk about business versus leisure travel, what's the share, like proportion of travelers that we see coming through the Montrose Airport who are business travelers versus leisure?
It's a good question, and I don't have a hard number. And I'm also not sure that business travelers take surveys. That's one of my challenges, because the number is lower than the feedback I get. And so, I don't have a great answer for that. I can answer in a macro sense of that, before the pandemic, business travel was the airline's bread and butter. I mean, that's where most of their revenue was coming from. And it's not so much the case now, but as I mentioned before, it's coming back. And I do, in my gut and from the feedback and just watching as we've talked and seen and all the great work that this region's done on the business development, know that demand is there. And watching the off-season flights fill again. And so, I probably can't even spitball that. But the survey numbers are, yeah.
So I'll chime in. So I sit on the Flights Alliance board wearing my Montrose hat. And, the flights in our airport, we have them because of the Telluride tourism economy. But then we benefit here in Montrose, both for our businesses that look at bringing business to Montrose, relocating, knowing they can get out, and then for the rest of us, I go home and I check on my parents, and you guys have maybe kids fly in to visit you, or you go on vacation. So I think Montrose would like to continue to build on that part of the air service, all the reasons it's good for Montrose, but at the end of the day, we have what we have because of the tourism in Telluride. I feel like I'll say that, I won't,
That's the horse that we rode to start this, right? and the idea is that it continues to expand. Like, we know that tourism is super seasonal, right? And that you can't hire an employee effectively for 2 seasons, right? And the idea is to round this entire thing out using the engine of tourism and then building diversified economic drivers, not to get too techy, up and down the 550, and then that all helps float the entire boat, and then all the pieces come up. But,
Yeah.
thanks, Barbara.
I think one great example, it'll be really fun to see the new Fairfield by Marriott hotel open up in Colorado Outdoors. They serve a certain kind of clientele that wants that Marriott level branded service, and they're right across the street practically from the airport, and they'll bring in not only great property tax for our county and our school system, but the sales tax will benefit the city and the URA development, and the lodging tax. So I don't think they would be building there if we didn't have the airport we have. So sometimes it's like, which came first? Okay, any other questions?
Yes, I'm interested in the percentage of flights that are scheduled into Telluride as to into Montrose. Are there flights scheduled into Telluride with Montrose as an alternative? How many flights are scheduled directly into Telluride?
We have a grand total of 2 a day. It is about 5% of our total capacity, and everybody's very happy for it on a 30-seat jet. So there's one Denver daily and one Phoenix daily. And then they do divert to here, if that's the question. Like when the weather's bad, they used to go to Cortez, is what probably people remember, and that was just a nightmare for everyone involved. And so,
For exception, they divert all the time. Their diversion rate is actually pretty low.
It's actually very low. So back in the turboprop days, without a lot of advanced technology, those planes did divert quite a bit. Now we have jets and we have GPS, basically aided approaches to get really techy. But the GPS assistance plus jets, bigger, faster, more powerful planes has allowed us to really improve that. And plus Denver Air is just a phenomenal operator, very highly trained pilots, the whole thing. And so really, there was an old perception that was like 30%, and even at 10%, that was too high. I think we're down in the 6 to 7% now, and they usually come in bunches, where it's like one blizzard will divert, the airport for 2 days, but then, the rest of the month is fine. And so, yeah, it's all working better. It's a small percentage, and we're looking to grow that too. If we could flow another flight in there, but ultimately the Montrose Airport is by far and away the heavy lifter for the region.
What's the average load factor for an airlines to break even?
There, unfortunately, I'm bound pretty tightly by NDAs when it comes to the finances of the airlines, etc. Let's just say if we're going to make a flight successful over time, it needs to start approaching 80% full.
Which is when my friends share, hey, we flew home from vacation and there were only 8 of us on this flight from Newark. I go, no, that's not good.
Well, hopefully that's like the day after Christmas going the wrong way.
It absolutely was.
Yeah.
I knew exactly why it was that way. They were psyched to get upgraded, but yeah.
That's when you hope the flight, and this is how our tourism economy goes, right? The flight in is 100% full and the flight out has 9 people on it, like certain weeks of the year. It's just how we got to deal with it.
Is there survey online, and also, do you have any, do you coordinate with any kind of transportation company? If I want to go out of Telluride to get a direct flight to Phoenix, if I can't, if it's out of season and Telluride's doing it and Montrose isn't, is there any kind of coordination with transportation?
The survey is online, but we generally keep it contained to the airport since it starts off as airport specific. And so it's in the building there, and actually that's one of the things I'm working on with Lloyd B now is getting it plugged into the Wi-Fi system there. So I'm not sure that it's a survey that's necessarily appropriate for just general public and outside of the airport travel group, but we've actually tried something like that before, but it raises a thought of maybe it's something time to do that again. And then yes, we do work kind of directly and indirectly with transportation companies. Both Telluride Express and Mountain Limo are running multiple vehicles up and down this highway every day. So if you want to fly out of Telluride, you can easily grab one of their shuttles. They would pick you up here door to door, I believe, or even easy enough, you can grab one from the airport. And as of tomorrow, they're about to announce a scheduled service between Lawson Hill and Mountain Village in the Telluride area to the airport every day. I think leaving there at 9:30 and 10:30 and coming back here at 1 and 2:30, and it's like $50. And so you can get on a nice bus and just get straight up there.
So the parking at Telluride Airport is really reasonable. They used to be free, but now it's a few bucks to park at Telluride Airport, right? So like if you drive from Montrose, your parking bill won't be that high if you're going to Phoenix for a week. And also the Mustang bus would take you to Lawson Hill where you can then pick up that other shuttle.
Yeah.
So so for folks, my friend who's flying to Phoenix a lot to check on her parents, she was like, wait a second, I'm flying to Denver to go to Phoenix? And now she goes to Telluride.
How do the airlines handle upgrades? Do you have to ask for them, or do they do some of them automatically?
A little bit of both. Maybe beyond my lane a little bit, but just from travel, I can attest that they do randomly select folks who are frequent flyers for upgrades when they have those seats. But generally, the best way to get upgrades is to start establishing your status with the airlines. And so get a credit card, and use that to build up miles. That helps your status with the airlines. Or use their credit card, but flying with them, make sure you're enrolled in their frequent flyer programs, and those are the things that'll make you eligible. And as you build more of that, you get picked more often.
Okay, I thought we were almost getting in. We got another question.
I'm interested in your budget and the number of people that you have working in the organization.
We don't generally discuss our budget in open meetings, but you're more than welcome to come to the board meetings, and we're actually going to have one up here, although it's not budget focused, it's airport tour focused. And at that point we can discuss, as far as the funding mechanisms go, it's probably, as the percentages kick up, it's about 35% from lodging tax, 35% from restaurant tax. The ski resort matches a minimum of 20%. We have another, and that's blended into some, so I'm going to get over 100% here. And then you have about 10% from the private sector and kind of somewhere 8 to 10% from the City of Montrose. And then, sorry, what was the second part?
Employees. You're full-time, and then you also have?
So with the employees, if you count the guest services team, we kind of have 3 people hard in the office. Like we have an administrative person, we have another person who runs programs like Merchant Pass, and she's also our marketing manager. And then we have a PR director as well that we share with the tourism office. And then we have about 5 or 8 people who work in the guest services team down here.
And 7 board members?
9 board members.
9 board members?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay. Fantastic. Let's give Matt a warm thank you.
Yeah,